I would like to invite Dr. Strader and Dr. Sprinkle and Dr. Attar to come forward here. And we're going to talk for, yes. These are three, this is Dr. Strader, and this is Dr. Sprinkle, and this is Dr. Attar. And yes, and they have some clients, or patients, I guess you'd say, in the audience, and they're the ones that helped connect to get these guys here. But I was asking them, how did this start? Well, you know, what was the beginning, and then just some of the exchange, and we'll put the mic in between you guys and pass it along, and here you go. Say what you were saying to me.
Well, I started out just with being anti-mercury. And I did that because the first epiphany was I had a patient who was 97 years old, and she was saying, when are you going to be done? Because I need to drive downtown and go back to work. And I thought, 97? And she didn't have any mercury fillings. She just had gold inlay. So I thought, well, maybe it's the mercury, because after all, in third world countries, you go to the ancient ones for wisdom. And in our country, the ancient ones take away their car keys. So that's the way I got started. And then, of course, I keep finding out that's just the edge of the iceberg. There's more and more. And the problems with fluoride, which I am not going to talk about because we've got the expert here. But I have had this opportunity to be part of this, and I appreciate that. And we're in University Park. University Park has never added fluoride to the water. That when the election took place at the very beginning, they said, no, not for us. So now we're working on Dallas.
I'm Alan Sprinkle, and I am a product of that non-fluoridated University Park water. So maybe that, but anyway, I got into this by accident. I had a seminar in Santa Fe, New Mexico with a Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt. I was interested in TMJ pain and chronic pain, facial pain, and I took a seminar with him. And he was just militantly anti-mercury, anti-root canal, anti-fluoride. And I really had a hard time, but I saw his patients and heard their stories about their chronic illness and what having their amalgams taken out and their root canals and getting off of fluoridated water and things like that. And it was a struggle for me initially because, you know, it was an assault on my self-image because, you know, I'd spent 4 years of dental school and a whole lot of my daddy's money getting a dental degree. And I didn't want to feel like I'd wasted that education. But the more I spent around Dr. Klinghardt and others, the more I was able to get my head around this concept. And then I started seeing it in my own patients when I started taking out mercury fillings and doing root canals and talking to them about other things. And so it's been an incredible journey since 1988, and I just thank God that I was able to participate in it.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for inviting me here tonight, and I see several familiar faces, friends back there. And for me, I think it was a sheer coincidence that I got to know Dr. Sprinkle and then started learning about mercury and fluoride and a lot of different things. And I think it all boils down to, as I was mentioning to you, that it's paradigm shift. You know, it's just basically you're trained in certain things, and then once you start looking and doing the research and just looking at the papers out there, you just have to completely, basically you look at the world through your, the way I look at the world is that I think nothing out there is really is what they tell you this. You know, there's a lot of, it's completely different. You know, it's a paradigm shift. You have to believe in yourself, and I think at the end it boils down to, it's not about us, it's about our children and our grandkids. You know, it's something that truly, you know, I have 2 grandkids, and every time that I look at them, I truly want them to eat the right food, or, you know, just know the truth, as I guess the There was a movie that said the truth is out there. I think it's up to us to ask for fair debates, basically. But whatever that these doctors mentioned, that, you know, I'm so grateful to all of you here and you guys, you know. Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Well, let's welcome Dr. Paul Connett.
Thanks very much, Regina, very much indeed. It is a team effort, and it's now a worldwide team effort, and it's delightful when you meet an organizer like Regina. She's absolutely fabulous. I'm going to introduce myself, but what I don't normally say is that my greatest claim to fame was that I played soccer with John Cleese. For any of you who know about Monty Python. And so if you think, he was a lousy centre forward. He was very enthusiastic. I don't think he ever scored a goal in any game that I watched or played in. But I've never met him since, by the way, and never had the chance to talk to him since. But anyway, that's my greatest claim to fame. Now, what you might also not know is that since 1985, I've been an environmental activist on a different issue, and that was fighting incineration, and more recently promoting sustainable ways of handling our discarded materials. It's not waste until it's wasted. And that has taken me to 49 states in the US, 7 provinces in Canada, and 60 other countries. I say that by way of saying that when my wife twisted my arm in 1996, would I read these papers? And I said, what is it? And she said, fluoridation. I said, take it away. These people are crazy. I said that for 2 reasons. One, I was so busy with going around the world every weekend, every holiday, every break, and teaching chemistry full time, trying to balance these 2 demands was very difficult. And the thought of having a third subject taking the rest of my time was too much, and certainly didn't want one that would stigmatize me as Looney Tunes. But my wife prevailed. And so I've had 18 miserable years. Last year I published this book. It's called The Zero Waste Solution, Untrashing the Planet One Community at a Time. I really do believe that zero waste is the stepping stone to sustainability. And I was very lucky because Jeremy Irons, famous actor who hosted this movie Trashed, which I also appear in, I met him in New York City and I asked him would he read my book, and eventually he wrote the foreword to this book. So that was exciting. Anyway, so that's Trashed. Now, I spent nearly 18 years fighting the fluoridation issue, first as a professor of environmental chemistry and toxicology. And the thing that's always intrigued me is mechanisms of action. When I hear that a substance is toxic, I want to know why it's toxic. What does it do when it reaches our cells to make them, to damage them? And then more recently as director of the Fluoride Action Network. And that research effort culminated in the publication of the case against fluoride. And I must acknowledge here that probably the best decision I made in 18 years was to invite this man, James Beck, MD, PhD from Calgary, to be a co-author, and also Spedding Micklem, a retired professor of biology from Edinburgh, to be my co-authors. And the moment I did that, it changed the whole tone of the book. The book became understated, not overstated. Everything is documented. These 2 were absolutely meticulous. So here's the situation. You had a retired chemistry professor, retired physics professor, and an MD, and a retired biology professor. And why I stress that is that we had time. We had time to read everything. And that's why I don't hold it against all those doctors and dentists out there who publicly are for fluoridation, because I know they don't have the time that I've had and we've had to read everything. The only thing I do hold against them is, having not read the literature, going onto a public platform and assuring the public it's safe and effective. That, in my view, is a betrayal of the public's trust, even more so by departments of health in the various fluoridated countries. More about that later. So here's the book. Everything is documented, 80 pages of documentation to the literature. Now, here's the extraordinary thing. This was published in October of 2010, and here we are in June of 2014, 3.5 years later, and there still has not been a written response to this book, a scientifically based written response to this book. And I find that extraordinary. I'll go back a little bit of history. Shortly after this book was published, I was invited to talk to the Ministry of Health in New Zealand, in Wellington, New Zealand. We were expecting 2 or 3 people to be there, but there weren't. There were 20 people. And I went through the whole book, went through all the arguments, and at the end of the presentation, I said, look, here are 3 opponents of fluoridation, and we have done everything that you could possibly demand of critics of a practice. We've made all the arguments transparent, we've documented everything, we've put it into a book, and there it is. I said, now, your job is to come back, to read this book and come back with a critique of this book. And I said, if you can't do that, then you should stop promoting this practice in New Zealand. You can't have it both ways. But my shock, in not the last trip to New Zealand, but the one before, after one of the towns had stopped fluoridating, the media went crazy, and the Minister of Health went on national television and accused the opponents of fluoridation of being anti-scientific and misrepresenting the science. And I thought that was rich. His own department, when challenged, could not produce a response to this book, but he goes on national television and slams us for being anti-science. That's the kind of thing that one has had to put up with for 18 years, and it's very frustrating. You saw it here in Dallas when this discussion came up in council, and the 3 of the councillors suggested that they were against fluoridation, and in comes this horrible editorial talking about tinfoil hats and so on. That's very painful. You know, when you spend 18 years of your life as a scientist getting to grips with the science, and I don't lie, and I don't twist and spin or anything else. I've got no need to do this. I make no money out of this. I've got no axe to grind on this. I didn't want the issue. And then to have some pipsqueak editorial writer insulting us. Come on, she's probably not read a single thing on fluoridation. And so, amongst other things, this issue is very depressing because what it tells you about the public health departments in this country, and Australia and New Zealand, they behave like parrots. They're not scientific. And then another thing you discover is democracy can't function unless the press does its job. And we have practically no investigative journalists left in this country. And it's dangerous. Your democracy is really threatened under these circumstances. And sometimes you only begin to learn these things when you're involved from the inside of an issue. You can see so clearly. I better get on, otherwise I won't get through here. So, a quote from Henrik Ibsen. I was driving in town a few months back, and all of a sudden I heard Garrison Keillor. He does a poem every morning on public radio. And he read this excerpt, and I thought it was lovely. He says, "It's not only what we have inherited from our father and mother that walks in us, it's all sorts of dead ideas and lifeless old beliefs and so forth. They have no vitality, but they cling to us all the same, and we cannot shake them off. Whenever I take up a newspaper, I seem to see ghosts gliding between the lines. There must be ghosts all the country over, as thick as the sands of the sea, and then we are, one and all, so pitifully afraid of the light." And that's what we have with our professional bodies in this country. They are pitifully afraid of the light on this issue of fluoridation. We have some exceptions. And although they will be harassed and ostracized by their colleagues, these people, and only these people, will save their profession. And I can put it very simply. You do not have to behave the way the fluoridation proponents behave if this practice was any good. A good practice is easy to sell. A bad practice, you have to use things like intimidation, suppression, censorship, and all those other things. And that's what you see with fluoridation. They can't sell it on its merits. They can't defend it in public. All right. So in my presentation, I will go through I'll do this quickly because you know them. 4 simple facts and 1 realization that opened my mind in 1996. The better ways of fighting tooth decay. I used to put this at the end, but I think we should put it at the beginning. Most people will not. I found this with incineration. You can moan and take all the problems of incineration, but unless you can come through with an alternative, people won't listen to you. So you can do so much by saying no, but you've got to say yes to something. So let's say yes to a different way of fighting tooth decay. The events that have made fluoridation obsolete, and estimating a safe dose to protect children from lowered IQ. If there's nothing else, when you leave this room tonight, I want you to know 3 words. What they mean, how significant they are in this debate. Those words are margin of safety. Margin of safety. This is the ammunition that you need when the other side says, oh, fluoride, it's only at high concentrations that fluoride causes problems. Don't bother about the National Research Council report. That was at high concentrations. There's no study that's been done which shows fluoridation causes any problems. The antidote to that nonsense, which is unscientific, is those 3 words, margin of safety. I'm going to explain in more detail how we do that when we found harm. When you found harm, you've got to determine what would be a safe level, and that includes a margin of safety analysis. I'll do that for the IQ studies. The propaganda used by public health officials, some of this will amuse and astound you. Why do health agencies and others continue to promote this obsolete practice? It's not worth a hill of beans, but for some reason they're putting a huge amount of money, political clout, into keeping this going. The more evidence that we produce, the more they keep it going. Why? It's a $64,000 question. I'm not sure if I know the answer, but I'll share my conjecture with you. And lastly, how can we end fluoridation? So, 4 simple facts and 1 realization that opened my mind in '96. As a biochemist, that's my main training, there's not one single process in the human body that needs fluoride to function properly. That's the biochemistry. Now, if you're the other side and you can't produce something in the body that needs fluoride to function, why on earth would you encourage people to swallow it? Especially, well, there's no evidence then that fluoride is an essential nutrient. On the other hand, there are many biochemical components and processes that are potentially harmed by fluoride, always with the caveat that you have to have sufficient concentration in the tissue involved. But we know that fluoride inhibits enzymes, switches on G proteins, and so on. And that's where I get excited because I like these mechanisms of action. It's very, very intriguing, incidentally, if you are a biochemist, to look at the exact mechanism that fluoride switches on G proteins. And G proteins are in the process of involved in the transmitting of messengers across membranes, which function in every tissue. I can't go into that, but I'm happy to share that information with anybody that is interested. This is the fact more than any other which persuaded me that this was a reckless practice. Nature determined that the baby does not need fluoride. The level of fluoride in mother's milk is extremely low, 0.004 parts per million. Now think about it. That means if the baby needs fluoride, every mother on this planet is deficient in fluoride. I don't think nature has made such horrendous mistake. Not only is this clear evidence, I think, that the baby does not need fluoride, but it's also a good clue that it might be dangerous for the baby, and I think we've got evidence now that it is dangerous for the baby. But it's reckless, because this means a bottle-fed baby in a fluoridated community, let's take Dallas at 0.7 parts per million, that baby is getting 175 times more fluoride than nature intended for a baby. That is ridiculous. Do a bunch of dentists in Chicago know more about what a baby needs than nature herself? I don't think so. So I think mother's milk protects our babies from fluoride. Now, another thing of great concern, and they've known this for a very long time, fluoride accumulates in our bones. Approximately 50 to 60% of the fluoride that we take in each day is excreted by the kidney. The other 40 to 50% is taken up by our bones and steadily accumulates in our bones over a lifetime. And the first symptoms of fluoride's damage to the bones, because it's happening every day in India and China and other countries with high natural fluoride, is pains in the joints, stiffness in the joints, identical to arthritis. There's never been a single attempt in any fluoridated country to look at arthritis rates as a function of fluoridation exposure. How many years you've been living in a fluoridated community. Absolutely irresponsible. And as the fluoride accumulates, the bones get harder and more brittle. And the concern here is hip fractures in the elderly. And here was the realization. I don't know when it came to me, but we simply shouldn't use the public water supply to deliver medicine. Now, is there any basis for that statement? Well, we haven't done it with any other nutrient or medicine, any other form of human treatment. We have not used the public water supply to deliver it since fluoridation began. So it seems that the medical community and the nutritional community agrees with me that we shouldn't do this. Now, they did have a short experiment before fluoridation began when they put iodine in the water to fight goiter. And people who are hyperthyroid didn't get enough iodine. And but that quickly stopped because it's very, very clear that some people became overexposed to iodine and suffered the opposite effect to their thyroid. So that stopped pretty quickly. And the reasons we don't use the public water supply to deliver medicine are pretty obvious. Number one, you can't control the dose, because you can't control how much water people drink. Secondly, you can't control who gets the treatment. It goes to everybody. It goes to babies. It goes to seniors. It goes to sick people. It goes to health, with people with poor nutrition. And in particular, it goes to people with poor kidney function who can't get rid of the fluoride. And it goes to people with low iodine, which means they can easily be pushed over the cliff as far as hypothyroidism is concerned. So no pharmacist would tell you to take a drug, take as much of it as you want, take it whenever you want, and everybody in your family could take it. And by the way, you're going to take it for a lifetime. I mean, this thing is so preposterous from a pharmaceutical point of view. And then finally, you would think that more doctors would appreciate this. It violates the individual's right to informed consent to medication. Your community of Dallas is literally doing to everyone in Dallas what a doctor in Dallas could not do to a single individual patient. You couldn't say, look, this has got some great stuff for you. Great stuff. Drink it. But doc, I don't want to. What's in it? Drink it. No, doc, I don't know. If you don't drink this, don't come back to my practice anymore. If you put any kind of pressure for a patient to take a drug, you're in trouble. You could lose your license. The doctor is meant to explain the side effects and the benefits, and the patient is supposed to make the decision. Now, I don't know it doesn't work. In practice, most people take the doctor's word for it and they swallow the pill and go with it. But it's extraordinary that this right has been taken away from us. Sometimes they go, well, it's not a medicine. Give me a break. A definition of a medicine is something that you give to somebody to treat a disease. We are putting fluoride in the water to treat or prevent tooth decay. You're treating a disease. You're trying to prevent a disease. It's a medicine. The better ways of fighting tooth decay, part 2. First of all, the vast majority of countries do not fluoridate their water. Here they are in 97% of Europe does not drink fluoridated water. Now, as they eagerly point out, some countries fluoridate their salt, but a minority, Austria, France, Germany, and Switzerland fluoridate their salt. But the majority neither fluoridate their salt nor their water, and yet, according to the World Health Organization data for 12-year-olds, here's the tooth decay coming down in 12-year-olds from the 70s to the present. Those are 4 fluoridated countries. Fluoridation obviously works. You know, and then you have parents here saying, oh, you know, when I was a kid, I had terrible tooth decay, but my children over here have wonderful teeth. That's because of fluoridation. Wonderful. Except if you were to go to the non-fluoridated countries, you'd see that tooth decay is coming down as fast or even faster than the fluoridated countries. If you want to see them all together, there they are. So there is little evidence here that fluoridation has made a huge contribution to fighting tooth decay. Or put it another way, the fact that a country does not fluoridate its water does not condemn its children to terrible teeth. So a better strategy, let's have a look at one country in particular, Scotland. First of all, though, most of the tooth decay today is concentrated in low-income families. About 80% of tooth decay is about 20% of the population. We need to target those families with better education and better diet. They do not need to swallow a substance that could put them in greater disadvantage. One of the functions of poverty is poor diet, and poor diet exacerbates the toxicity of fluoride. That's well established. So those kids do not need fluoride. They do not to put to be greater disadvantage, because fluoride's toxic effects are made worse by poor diet. Everyone agrees that fluoride's benefits are largely topical. Thus, it makes more sense to provide topical treatments. Those topical treatments could be applied as fluoride varnishes, or more simply with brushing with fluoridated toothpaste. But better still, I would encourage the use of xylitol toothpaste. Xylitol is a natural sugar. It's produced in our own bodies, about 15 grams a day. It's produced in things like strawberries and pine bark, where it's extracted. It's been used in Finland for over 30 years, in Japan, everywhere you go, it's xylitol, xylitol, xylitol. Now here's the properties of this substance which make it very attractive. Once this xylitol is in the mouth, the bacteria that convert sugar to acids, which then attack the enamel and start the first process in tooth decay, cannot stick to a surface. They cannot stick to the plaque or the tooth. And if they can't stick to anything, they wither away. They can't survive in the mouth. And this is very nice because it's a mechanism of hurting those bacteria without hurting ourselves, because we don't have to go around sticking to anything. In Scotland, now Scotland is not fluoridated because of a court case. So instead of water fluoridation, the Scottish government opted for this program called the Child Smile Program. And this is what it's, the components. School-based toothbrushing schemes. Every nursery school in Scotland teaches kids how to brush their teeth. Secondly, they offer healthy snacks and drinks to the children. They also have the parents involved, giving them the same advice on weaning, diet, teething, and toothbrushing, and particularly on better diet. There are annual dental checkups, and the treatment is given if required. And also, there are fluoride varnish applications that they can also give those for those most in need. Now, the results are pretty encouraging. The proportion of children aged 4 to 6 without obvious dental decay has risen from 42% in 96 to 67% in 2012, and for 10 to 12-year-olds rose from 52.9% in 2005 to 72.8% in 2013. Their goal for, I think, 2015 was 70%, so they're actually way ahead of their goals. And this has been cost effective. This is a BBC Scotland, more or less the same thing. Let me, it emphasizes the importance of toothbrushing and helps parents establish a healthy diet from the earliest stage. And listen to this. Glasgow researchers, as you probably know, Glasgow has a large proportion of low-income families, notorious for tooth decay. And Glasgow researchers found that the scheme had reduced the cost of treating dental disease in 5-year-olds by more than half between 2001 and 2010. So the advice is obvious. Instead of frittering away $1 million on poison to give to kids and make their situation worse in low-income families, study the program in Scotland and put that money to work in this way without poisoning the rest of the population. In short, our kids need more brushing, more fruit and vegetables, less sugar. Less sugar means less tooth decay and less obesity. So if you're worried about where the money is going to come for education, then combine it with an attack on obesity. Less obesity means less diabetes and fewer heart attacks. In other words, education to promote less sugar consumption is a good investment. We need education, not fluoridation, to fight tooth decay and obesity. So that's the end of part 2. Part 3. Yeah, that's good. That applause is good. You all like the positive news. There are positive solutions here. The events have made fluoridation obsolete. Well, event 1, it has a sort of a long history. Starting about 1982, there are a series of articles in major journals, and I do mean major journals like Science, Nature, talking about the mysterious fact that tooth decay seemed to be about the same in fluoridated and non-fluoridated countries and communities. Leverett in Science, Cahoon in several journals, Diesendorf in Nature, and Gray in a Canadian journal in 1987, all reaching these same things. Little difference in tooth decay between fluoridated and non-fluoridated communities. Now this led the US government, or actually the US National Institute of Dental Research, highly pro-fluoridation organization, to do a massive survey of tooth decay in the American population, children. They looked at 39,000 children in 84 communities. Cost the taxpayers about $4 million. And the authors of this study, when it was published in 1990, Brunel and Carlos, they examined decayed, missing, and filled permanent tooth surfaces of children who spent all their lives in a fluoridated community and compared them with children who'd lived all their lives in a non-fluoridated community. This is one subset of their study. So we're looking at children who had lived all their lives in a fluoridated community And the average tooth decay for children aged 5 to 17 was 2.8 decayed, missing, and filled surfaces. To put that into perspective, there are 4 surfaces on the cutting teeth, top 6, bottom 6, 5 surfaces on the chewing teeth, and when all the teeth have come out in a child's mouth, we're talking about a total of 128 surfaces. So not much tooth decay, the average in fluoridated communities. Now look at non-fluoridated. Non-fluoridated, it was 3.4. You subtract one from the other, and the average difference, or saving in tooth decay, for children 5 to 17, the difference between a child lived all its life in a fluoridated community versus all its life in a non-fluoridated community amounted to 0.6 of a tooth surface. That's what all the angst is supposed to be about, except that it's worse than that, because not only is this a very small difference, the authors didn't show that it was statistically significant. And if we try to get away with that, we'll be in deep trouble with any study. So they have not demonstrated a statistically significant change in the largest study ever carried out in the United States. Now, this study, that was the largest study. This is the most precise study. This study is actually unique because this is the only study that looked at tooth decay as a function of individual exposure. That other study and all the other studies have compared populations where you really don't know what the individuals are getting. Because children in a non-fluoridated area could be getting fluoride from other sources, other communities, other food. And similarly, children in the non-fluoridated area, and the fluoridated area could be drinking bottled water. We don't know, so we don't have a good handle. But in this case, these researchers in the famous Iowa study estimated or calculated each child's daily exposure to fluoride in milligrams per day. They tabulated the exposure through water, the exposure through toothpaste, exposure through food, calculated. And what they wanted to find out, these researchers, was the optimal dose that a child needed to fight tooth decay. How many milligrams per day does a child need to swallow to reduce tooth decay? They'd never defined that optimal dose. What do they find? They found no clear relationship. They actually state, these findings suggest that achieving a caries-free status may have relatively little to do with fluoride intake. So if you look at it on an international level, World Health Organization, little difference. You look at it in the largest survey in the United States, little difference. You look at it precisely in terms of individual exposure, no clear relationship. So the claim that swallowing fluoride lowers tooth decay is still unproven. In fact, incredibly, after 68 years, they've never done a randomized control trial, an RCT, which is the gold standard of epidemiology. This is what the FDA requires for any new drug. That's what they require. Never been done for fluoride. So they've had to content themselves with grade B studies where you then introduce the difficulty of comparing two communities, and it's very difficult to choose two communities where everything is the same except the one thing that you're looking at, which would be fluoride exposure. So not good evidence. Now, event 2 probably explains everything I've said on tooth decay up to this point. In 1999, the Center for Disease Control, and let me explain who they are, we are talking about the Oral Health Division of the Centers for Disease Control. The Center for Disease Control is about 20,000 people, scientists in Atlanta. The Oral Health Division is 30 people, and they're all dentally trained. And their mission is to promote fluoridation. So when this Oral Health Division says that fluoridation is one of the top 10 public health achievements of the 20th century, it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's what they're trying to do. Never mind. Anyway, they concluded that the predominant benefit of fluoride is topical, not systemic. Whoops! We got the mechanism wrong for over 50 years. That's what they said there. And this is when fluoridation should have ended. But let me give you the exact quote so that you can see that I'm not messing around with words here. Fluorides carries preventive properties initially were attributed to changes in enamel during tooth development, meaning when the tooth was under the gum during the development. However, laboratory and epidemiologic research suggests that fluoride prevents dental caries predominantly after eruption of the tooth into the mouth, and its actions primarily are topical. Now, that should have ended fluoridation. Because if fluoride works on the outside of the tooth and not from inside the body, why swallow fluoride and expose every tissue of the body to a toxic substance when you can brush it on your teeth and spit it out? And why have the audacity, the arrogance to force it on people when it works topically? There is absolutely no justification for doing that, once you've admitted that the predominant action is topical. So, event number 3. Event number 3 was the publication of this document from the National Research Council. And let me give you some background on this. This panel, this 12-membered panel that reviewed, at the request of the EPA, the toxicology of fluoride in water, and was asked to review the safety of the drinking water standards for fluoride, was 12 people. And for the first time in US history on this issue, it was a balanced panel. They had 3 pro-fluoridation, 3 anti-fluoridation, and 6 who had never declared a position. They expected to get this review done in 1 year. It took them 3.5. I'm happy to tell you I was the only anti-fluoridation scientist who was invited to give testimony to them. They gave me 45 minutes immediately after the Oral Health Division of the CDC. And I'm happy to say that much of what I said was included in their analysis, at least the literature. So here's the report. This is when it came out. And shortly after it came out, and I should explain, they did not, their remit was not to look at fluoridation, but to look at fluoride's toxicity. And they found that, that fluoride damaged teeth, bone, the thyroid gland, and the brain, given an adequate concentration. It could do all of those things. Immediately after this report came out, the American Dental Association, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the Oral Health Division, and the Australian National Health and Medical Research Council all claimed that this report was not relevant to water fluoridation at 0.7 to 1.2. Now, there's 3 things wrong with that statement. Clearly unscientific. Let's give the 3 things which are wrong with it. First of all, they don't know the difference between concentration and dose. When they say they found effects at 2 to 4 parts per million, that's not relevant to 0.7. People drink 0.7 to 1.2. Poppycock. Somebody, because you can't control dose, somebody drinking a lot of water at 1 part per million can get more fluoride than someone drinking a little water at 2 parts per million, and somebody, even somebody drinking a little water at 4 parts per million. So the concentrations may look different, but the doses overlap. And that is a fatal mistake. It's a self-serving mistake, and it's been used by proponents since 1945. The second thing is they have little notion of the basics of regulatory toxicology. You can't just take a report and within 24 hours saying everything's safe. You have to look carefully at the endpoints, you have to look at the doses which caused harm, and then you've got to do a margin of safety analysis to see at what level would be safe to protect the whole population. That's a risk assessment. And they didn't do that. The EPA, now it's 2014, this is 8 years, and the EPA has not concluded a risk assessment, even though the National Research Council recommended that they do so. And for political reasons, I believe. But the third thing is, the ADA, the CDC, and NHMRC can't read. Okay, they said, it's not relevant to water fluoridation. We fluoridated 0.7 to 1.2. Okay, let's look at it. In chapter 2 of this review, second chapter, they obviously didn't make it as far as the second chapter, those people working full-time at taxpayers' expense at the CDC, didn't make it to the second chapter because they did an exposure analysis in the second chapter and showed there were several subsets of the population that were exceeding the EPA's safe reference dose, drinking fluoridated water at 1 part per million. And one of those was bottle-fed babies. Look at this picture. Down the bottom axis are the different age ranges, starting with babies on the left going across. The one I've circled is bottle-fed infants. It says non-nursing. And the line across is the safe reference dose for the EPA, and the circled is the bottle-fed baby. So clearly the bottle-fed baby is exceeding the EPA's safe reference dose if the bottle formula is made up with fluoridated water. So don't tell me it's not relevant to water fluoridation. I mean, well. The statements from the ADA, CDC are political, not scientific statements. And basically what we're seeing with them and all the other health agencies in Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, Canada, the United States, and England are basically protecting the fluoridation program, not protecting the public's health for whatever reasons, and I'll go into that in part 7 if I get there. Event 4. The CDC published the dental fluorosis figures confirming that American kids are hugely overexposed to fluoride. It's not a fact. I mean, right now they're considering fluoridating more communities, trying to introduce fluoridation into Hawaii, trying to introduce mandatory fluoridation in different states like New Jersey and so on. And yet the evidence is our kids are getting too much fluoride, not too little. Here's the evidence. At the very beginning, they knew that if they fluoridated water at 1 part per million, about 10% of the kids would get dental fluorosis. But so mild, this is a mottling discoloration of the tooth enamel, so mild that only a dentist would notice it and not to worry about it. It was a trade-off. Lower tooth decay and 10% of the kids would get very mild dental fluorosis. This is very mild dental fluorosis. This is one end of the range. At the other end of the range, very mild dental fluorosis would be white specks, opaque specks on the cusp of the teeth. Look around, you'll probably see kids with that in Dallas today. And at the other end of the range, it's up to 25% of the enamel is impacted with these opaque patches, which then can get discolored, stained later on in life. So that's very mild. And run the clock forward then to 2010, where the CDC admitted that 41% of all American children aged 12 to 15, and that includes children in fluoridated and non-fluoridated, so the fluoridated kids would be higher, had dental fluorosis. Here, here it is, 41%. You notice 28.5% very mild, 8.6% mild. Show you what that looks like. Mild is up to 50% of the enamel impacted, between 26 and 50% impacted, and moderate or severe, 100% of the enamel impacted. This is either moderate or severe dental fluorosis, 100% of the enamel impacted. So our kids are being overexposed to fluoride. Now, I'm not going to go into a discussion of whether this is dangerous or whatever. What I'm going to go on to is to ask the question, the key question, is dental fluorosis is what we can see. What about things that we can't see? We can't see what is happening to their bones, even though the teeth grow out of the bones. We can't see what it's doing to their brains or their thyroid or what have you. And so that is the key question. What is fluoride doing to the baby's growing tissues when it's damaging their tooth cells? And the thing which has concerned me for a long time is that since 1991, there's been a growing body of evidence that fluoride damages the brains of animals and humans. And the weight of evidence here, the weight of evidence is astounding. Let me give it to you. Over 40 animal studies shows that prolonged exposure to fluoride can damage the brain. They know it can enter the brain. They know which parts of the brain it concentrates in. They know what receptors, etc., it impacts. These are the ones I'm interested in. 19 animals report that mice or rats ingesting fluoride have impaired capacity to learn and remember. And with the beauty of animal studies is that you don't have all the confounding variables. You have two sets of animals. One is dosed and the other one isn't. And you put them in a maze and one performs better than the other. So it's pretty clear cut. Another 12 studies, 7 human and 5 animal, which links fluoride with neurobehavioral deficits. 3 human studies which shows that fluoride damages the fetal brain. This is from China with aborted fetuses in areas endemic for fluorosis. And finally, 37 out of 43 published studies shows that fluoride lowers IQ, or rather, it's associated with lowering of IQ. Lowering of IQ in children is associated with exposure to fluoride. Not cause and effect, just an association. Now, proponents of fluoridation have offered practically no published studies to offset the weight of evidence that fluoride is a potent neurotoxin. And that's one of the questions you should ask anybody that testifies in Dallas on their side. You could go through those lists of studies. These are the studies which have found that fluoride can damage the brain. Mr. Dr. So-and-so, what studies have convinced you personally, that you don't have to worry about all these studies? What is it that you've read? And of course, he won't have read anything. He will be told by the ADA it's not a problem, or some other body. Here's an animal study. Most of the animal studies are conducted at higher concentrations than we get, but it takes between 5 and 20 times more fluoride to reach the same plasma levels in a rat as it takes humans. So you have to dose the rat 5 to 20 times as much fluoride to get to the same plasma levels. But this is an extraordinary study because this study was done at 1 part per million. Rats given 1 part per million fluoride in their water for 1 year, long-term study. The animals had kidney damage, brain damage, a greater uptake of aluminium into the brain, and beta amyloid deposits, which are thought to be characteristic of Alzheimer's disease. Incredible. This is at 1 part per million. I know of no attempt by any other fluoridated country to reproduce this study. Zhang, who I've met, who will be coming, I hope, to Washington to our conference in September, invited me to go to look at these villages where he did his study, but one village had a natural fluoride, less than 0.7 parts per million in the well water, and the other village had between 2.5 and 4.5 parts per million. He controlled for lead and iodine exposure, very important confounding variables, and more recently, he's controlled for arsenic. He went back and looked at the arsenic levels, and he found that the arsenic levels were actually higher in the low fluoride village than in the high fluoride village. So it was not a confounding factor. And he found a drop of 5 to 10 IQ points across the whole age range and a complete shift in the IQ curve for both males and females. Here's the male curve. So the black line is the low fluoride village, the high fluoride village. You see the whole IQ curve has been shifted over. That is very serious, very significant. I'll talk about it later. It's particularly significant down here where it increases the number of mentally handicapped children. More about that later. Now, I'm sure you heard about this, that in 2012, a team from Harvard University, or two from Harvard University, Anna Choi and Philippe Grandjean. Philippe Grandjean is an extremely well-known epidemiologist, known especially for his work on mercury. They did a meta-analysis of 27 studies. You can do a meta-analysis when the methodology is the same. And in this case, they compared the IQs of two sets of villages, one with a high fluoride in the water, one with a low, just like Zhang. So they're all the same methodology, so now you can add up the numbers. So you've got a much larger study. So in these 27 studies, the study was published in Environmental Health Perspectives, is one of the leading journals in that subject in the world. The Harvard team acknowledged, as everybody else has, that there's a lot of weaknesses in their studies. We would like to have more information than these Chinese researchers. Most of them were in Chinese. There were a couple in Iranian, one in Indian, and one in Mexican. They would like more information. However, they also acknowledged the results were remarkably consistent. Out of these 27 studies, 26 had a lowering of IQ. And the IQ lowering was substantial. The average lowering of IQ was 7 IQ points. Now, the promoters claim that the fluoride levels in the high fluoride villages were so high they're not relevant to fluoridation programs. You know, they say this so easily. This is the Pew Foundation. You heard of the Pew Foundation? You hear about them on National Public Radio. They're such a lovely, decent organization. They are spending millions promoting fluoridation. And I wouldn't mind if they were honest, but their science is disgusting. Even when it's pointed out to them that they say, oh, well, these levels went as high as 11 parts per million. Yes, the levels went up to 11 parts per million in 2 of the 27 studies. 9 of the studies. All the rest were less than 10 parts per million, and 9 of the studies were less than 3 parts per million. Less than 3 parts per million, and we're getting an average lowering of IQ by 7 IQ points. But comparing concentrations is simplistic. What is needed is a margin of safety analysis. Remember those 3 words you've got to remember? Okay. So here is a margin of safety analysis, and the goal is to estimate a safe dose of fluoride which we could confidently predict would protect all children in a large population from lowered IQ. So here we have these studies. And now we want to do an analysis, we want to work out the dose, apply the normal standard procedures, which amount to safety factors, to determine what we would confidently suggest that all kids, if they didn't get above this level of fluoride, their IQs would be protected. That's what we're trying to do here. And the EPA does this all the time with known toxics. So our task is to find the no observable adverse effect level, this is called the no-L, and divide by a margin of safety of 10 to protect the whole population. So let me explain the second part of that. These are small groups of children. Most of them were Chinese children. And we say, this is the harm was caused at this dose. Our job is to determine from this, or estimate from this, what would be a safe dose for all the millions of American children. The variation in all those children in the United States is huge compared to that small group of Chinese children. In no way has that small group of Chinese children taken into account the full range of sensitivity. You're going to have different genetic factors, you're going to have different lifestyles, different diets, different exposures to different chemicals, and huge. So the standard factor that we use is having found a level which has caused harm. If it's a small study group, we divide by 10 to get the safe dose to protect our whole population. So let's go through the procedure. So we'll find the study which had the lowest concentration where lowered IQ was found. Here are five of the studies which found a lowering of IQ. There's the IQ point difference. 3 of them are Chinese, 2 of them are Iranian, and you see the levels: 1.8, 2, 2.9, 2.5, 2.38 parts per million was the high fluoride group. So we find the lowest level, which we think causes harm, which is the concentration is 1.8. That's 1.8 milligrams per liter. We've got to convert that to a dose now. We've got to work out the dose. And I'm going to do this very, very simply. I'm going to say it's a reasonable assumption that the average consumption of water by children is about half a liter a day. Half a liter. So if a kid, we're saying, if one of those Chinese children drank half a liter of water at 1.8 parts per million, it would lower their IQ. So what would be the dose then? Well, it would be half a liter per day times 1.8 milligrams per liter. The dose, to lower the IQ, is 0.9 milligrams of fluoride per day. So that's our starting point, okay? The safe dose of the dose which causes harm, 0.9 per day. Now, this is the lowest observable adverse effect level, or low L. In the absence of data, we don't know the NOEL. We don't know what dose didn't result in no lowering of IQ. So standard procedure, if you're presented with a low L but you don't have a NOEL, to get to the NOEL, you divide by 10. So 0.9 divided by 10 is 0.09 milligrams per day. Now we're ready to apply the safety factor for the whole range of sensitivity in a human population. Divide by another factor of 10, it's 0.009 milligrams per day. That is the safe dose. Now let's work out how much water a kid would have to drink to get 0.009 milligrams per day. There's the calculation. The children should not drink more than 0.009 liters per day of water at 1 milligram, 1 part per million, 1 milligram per liter. And 0.009 liters is 9 milliliters of water, or 2 teaspoons. In other words, if those studies from China are valid, if they can't completely demolish them, they will try, it means that we are not protecting our children from lowered IQ drinking fluoridated water. Now, I've used 2 safety factors, and you're probably uneasy about that. So let's lift them. Let's lift. If we drop one safety factor of 10, then the children shouldn't drink more than 90 milliliters of water at 1 part per million. That's half a glass of water. And if we drop 2 safety factors of 10, both of the safety factors of 10, the child shouldn't drink more than 900 milliliters of water. That's about a quart. In other words, even when you drop both our safety factors, it's still not safe for children to be drinking fluoridated water at 1 part per million as far as protecting all our kids. Not just protecting the average kid. We've got to protect all our kids, right? Okay, so that's the margin of safety analysis. And simply put, if fluoride lowers the IQ of children drinking water at 1.8 parts per million in a small study group, it is not safe, protective against lowered IQ for all the children in a large population drinking fluoridated water at 0.7 to 1.2 parts per million. I'm going to rush over this. I would just quickly say that in addition to these lowering of IQ, some of the studies related the drop in IQ to the level of fluoride in the kid's urine, which is an indirect measure of daily exposure. The more you're exposed each day, the more that's excreted in the urine, and in the child's plasma. That was that last study by Zhang. He'll be talking about this in Washington in September. So the bottom axis there is the serum fluoride levels, and the IQ on the left-hand side. So you can see it's coming down. The higher the level measured in the serum, the lower the IQ. And that strengthens your study. You're not just looking at populations now, you're looking at measures of individual exposure. Now, this is what Grandjean, one of the authors of the Harvard study, said. Fluoride seems to fit in with lead, mercury, and other poisons that cause chemical brain drain. That's a phrase of his. He has a web page called Chemical Brain Drain. The effect of each toxicant may seem small, but the combined damage on a population scale can be serious, especially because the brain power of the next generation is crucial to all of us. And I want to show a series of figures to illustrate this important point. IQ, like every other human trait, IQ is distributed normally. It's the bell-shaped curve. So for every feature, whether you're looking at height, weight, or in this case, IQ, the large percentage of the population will have the average value or clustered around the average value, but there will be a small number of people at this end who will have a high value and people at this end who have a low value. So look at these two areas, very important areas. You see that green area? That green area, that is the fraction of the total where the kids are very, very bright or geniuses. Okay? And this magenta area, that's the fraction of the total population where the kids are mentally handicapped. Now, if we were to lower the IQ of the whole population, we would do a shift, lower the IQ by 5 IQ points, the average would go from 100 to 95. If you were a parent or a school teacher, you wouldn't notice the difference between those kids, one with an IQ of 100 and 95. You'd have to do a study to get those, tease those numbers out. But look what it does to the two tails. If you shift the IQ of the whole population over, you halve the number of geniuses in your society and you double the number of mentally handicapped. That has huge social and economic ramifications for any country, but particularly the United States, competing in the global marketplace. This is very serious indeed. And if you have any inkling that a substance out there is doing this, you stop it. Especially when it's being put in the bloody drinking water of every man, woman, and child in the country, and to do what? To possibly save 0.6 of a tooth surface. It is utterly preposterous. I remember there were people that came from the concentration camps in Europe and were explaining, this is Elie Wiesel in his book. He said that people were coming from the concentration camps, or one person in particular was trying to tell people what was happening to the Jews in wherever, what was happening in the concentration camp, and nobody would listen to him. Nobody would listen. And in the end, he couldn't talk. It's in the book. He couldn't talk. And I think that anybody that sees this, especially a bloody doctor, and somebody who's in a health department who's being paid to protect the public's health, and some of these people are being paid 2 or 3 times more than I was ever paid as a professor, and not to do something about this and continue to parrot this propaganda, it's absolutely disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. Fluoridation may actually be killing a few young boys each year. This is the whole osteosarcoma story. This is the study by Basson. It's never been refuted. I will rush over the details. There are other health issues I could talk about: lower thyroid function, arthritis, hip fractures, and the fact that some individuals are very sensitive to fluoride. The governments There's not one single government in any fluoridated country that's taken any steps to put on a scientific level the many anecdotal reports that people report that they are sensitive to fluoride. When the source of fluoride is removed, their symptoms clear up. When the fluoride is reintroduced, their symptoms come back. They are convinced that they're sensitive to fluoride. The government dismisses it as anecdotal and has made no attempt to put it on a scientific basis. Again, irresponsible. So, no risk is acceptable if it's avoidable. There's no need to swallow fluoride. Other countries have demonstrated there are other and better ways of fighting tooth decay without forcing water fluoridation on the whole population. Fluoridation is an obsolete practice, and it's time to end it. Part 5, the propaganda used by some civil servants in the promotion of fluoridation. I'm going to put this in because it's a little funny, and it's outrageous. So this is Queensland. Back in 2007, Queensland, which had never been fluoridated, resisted fluoridation for 40-odd years, suddenly decided that they were going to have mandatory fluoridation for the whole state. And in the newspapers appeared these advertisements from Queensland Health, the Department of Health in Queensland, the state of Queensland. This is what they said. In Townsville, water supplies have been fluoridated since 1964, resulting in 65% less tooth decay in children than those in Brisbane. Wow. Doesn't that sound good? 65% less tooth decay if we fluoridate. Let's look at the data. The data comes from one study for one age, 7, and it's true. The numbers, there's not a lie, but look at the arithmetic here. It's a 65% difference, but what is the absolute saving? 0.17 of a tooth surface. That's what it was. 0.09 in Townsville, 0.26 in Brisbane, difference is 0.17. What if those newspaper ads had said, if you introduce fluoridation, we'll get 0.17 of a tooth surface saved? It gets worse. What's that? Yes, the numbers are 300 at 6 years of age, 240 at 7, 262 at 8, and so on. Okay.
0.17 of
one tooth surface.
Of the whole mouth.
No, 0.17 of one tooth surface.
But in the whole mouth.
Oh, yes, out of the whole mouth. Oh, which is 100. Well, it wouldn't be 128 at the age of 7. It would be about 100. Okay. Now, this Queensland Health, remember, these are our bureaucrats who were teeth exposed to fluoridated water. What do teeth look like that are not exposed to fluoridated water? I mean, Goebbels would blush with this. I mean, is that what the teeth look like in non-fluoridated Sweden, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Spain? And then there's the pamphlet. This pamphlet was sent to every Australian MP before they voted to introduce mandatory fluoridation. What? Oh, sorry. This leaflet was given to every Australian MP in Queensland before they voted to introduce mandatory fluoridation into Queensland.
How did their teeth look before they had fluoridation?
I don't know. And then, don't you love this? Could you imagine a more caring person than that lady there? She's the medical officer of health, Dr. Hazel Lynn, and she holds up a picture of children's teeth. And what is she holding up? She's holding up a picture of baby bottle tooth decay, which is what was this here also. This is baby bottle tooth decay. And this is caused by babies sucking on bottles of sugared water, milk, or Coca-Cola even, and the top teeth rot down to the gums. It's despicable, it's horrible, but fluoridation does not mitigate this problem. You get as many cases of abuse of teeth from bottle baby tooth decay in fluoridated is non-fluoridated. So this woman, whose salary is about $250,000 a year, is betraying the public's trust by peddling propaganda. That's all it is. And here is Dr. Peter Cooney. Dr. Peter Cooney is the Chief Dental Officer of Canada. And he told an audience in Dryden, Ontario, and I was there on April the 1st, 2008. And he said to these people who were going to vote in a referendum a few weeks later whether to continue fluoridation or not. And he said, I walked down your high street today and I didn't see anyone growing horns. And you've been fluoridated for 40 years. So we now know what the Canadian research program on health effects of fluoride is. They go around looking at everybody to see if they're growing horns. So they have specialists, goat horn, bull horn, cow horn, moose horn, deer horn. And they've concluded, having looked at everybody's head, this fluoridation is absolutely safe. There's no problems at all. I'm happy to tell you that people voted, I think, 80 to 20 to stop fluoridation in Dryden. And the way that this issue has been controlled for so long, which the National Research Council broke away from in 2006, was to handpick the panels that were studying the fluoridation. And this particularly egregious examples, the Irish Fluoridation Forum handpicked panel, rubber stamp for fluoridation in 2002, Australian National Health and Medical Research Council 2007, handpicked panel, rubber stamped fluoridation, one in the few months before the Queensland. It was rushed out for that. And then finally, Health Canada in 2011. Now, Health Canada chose 6 experts to help them with this report. 6 experts were chosen. Of those 6 experts, 4 of them were dentists and well-known promoting pro-fluoridation dental researchers. So out of 6, 4 people were dental researchers, and they were known to be pro-fluoridation. Okay, what we have here are public servants betraying the public's trust. This is not healthy in a democratic society. And talking about not healthy, going back to the media, a town in New South Wales, the council, in their innocence, voted out fluoridation. This triggered a massive campaign by the Murdoch newspapers in New South Wales. The series is called Stop the Rot. Fluoride Furor. No reason to smile. These are the people who condemned kids to tooth decay. They put the photographs of all the councillors who had voted out fluoridation. Can you imagine what it's like to be a local councillor? You make a vote, and then you have this newspaper, well, Stop the Rot, this newspaper putting your photograph in there saying, you're hurting our kids. It's vicious, vicious. Part 6, why do health agencies and others continue to promote this obsolete practice? Motivations. Many dentists and doctors are fiercely proud of this public health policy and do not question its safety and effectiveness. Okay, that's the problem. They do not question it. They're not reading the literature. But it is fossilized into a belief system. Motivations. There are some entities with economic interests and liabilities. The sugar lobby. The sugar lobby. 1 year before the US Public Health Service endorsed fluoridation, the sugar lobby said in its journal, we need to find a way to reduce tooth decay without reducing sugar consumption. They've never gone away. They poured money into nutrition departments of universities in the US to promote sugar as a nutrient and fluoridation as the treatment. The dental researchers for whom fluoridation is the gravy train, as long as you are pro-fluoridation, you can get all the money you want for dental research. The phosphate fertilizer industry, they're getting rid of its waste. The toothpaste manufacturers, I think they have liabilities here. I believe, you know, I went through those numbers, 0.009 milligrams per day. If that's valid, then toothpaste is a problem too, because kids are getting that amount of fluoride from the toothpaste. So if what? Yeah, I don't know. There are 20,000 complaints. You know the Contact Poison Control Center? I think there's about 20,000 a year of people actually do that, phone up the Poison Control Center and say, my kid swallowed fluoride. Yeah, kids lock themselves in the bathroom and swallow toothpaste. I remember during the war, when I was in England, I did that with my cousin. We got up in the middle of the night. We started mixing powdered toothpaste in a glass, and then we played around with it, ate some of it. Okay, the dental organizations that endorse fluoridated products, the American Dental Association, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that the ADA will not give its seal of approval on toothpaste unless it does have fluoride in it. And therefore, with their seal of approval on all these fluoridated products, I think they're very concerned now about liabilities when fluoridation falls. And there's some people who think that its fall is inevitable. It's going to happen. It's just a question of... They get huge income from all these dental manufacturers. And you saw the same thing with mercury. The whole thing has been protecting, the ADA is protecting itself from liabilities by pretending that mercury amalgams have no health problems at all. Motivations. The industry's... Now, Christopher Bryson has written about this in a book called The Fluoride Deception. This probably explains why fluoridation began. Chris Bryson documented collusion between the US Public Health Service and the Fluorine Lawyers Association. Who are the Fluorine Lawyers Association? This is a group of lawyers that defended companies that produced fluoride as a pollutant that was damaging agriculture in lawsuits. Why were they colluding with the US Public Health Service? I believe that the biggest concern here was companies like the aluminum industry were concerned about liabilities with their own workers. I've met workers in the aluminum industry who can't lift their arms above their shoulders because their connective tissue has been rotted out by fluoride. So the lawsuits on that, I think those people are quaking in their boots. They know if fluoridation falls and it becomes clear that 0.009 milligrams per day can cause lowering of IQ, my God, what's it doing to these workers? They're probably getting dozens of milligrams of fluoride a day. But I'm getting to it. Motivations, public health agencies. Why public health agencies? Are they worried that if fluoridation falls, that it will erode the public's trust, which in turn may undermine other public practices? And when you think of other public health practices, the first one that comes to mind is vaccination. So, now, I'm not here to argue against vaccination. I have a lot of problems with vaccination, but that's not my purpose here. My purpose is to say, again, I don't think a saving of 0.6 of a tooth justifies or explains what is happening. But I do believe what is happening may be defending other public health policies by proxy. It's a bit like defending a medieval castle, right? You have an outer perimeter, you have an inner perimeter, you have the moat, the drawbridge, and the castle, and the king in the castle. That's the analogy. The outer perimeter is fluoridation. You defend that as long as you can. Then you retreat. You've got to defend vaccination. Then you lift up the drawbridge, go into the castle, and you're defending orthodox medicine, one tablet for every problem. And who's the king in the castle? The pharmaceutical industry. So, you know, that's one way of looking at it. Again, that's all conjecture. It's fun. The best way to regain the public's trust is to end this obsolete practice as soon as possible. Most people are very forgiving to people who say, I'm sorry, I goofed, or at least the people 50 years before me goofed. But now we know it's not working as we said it worked, that it doesn't seem to be very effective, that there are alternative methods, and there may be dangers. We are going to stop this. They would start to regain the public's trust, not lose it. So I think they got it upside down. Part 7, how can we end this obsolete practice? One open mind at a time. One open mind at a time. Even very important, one open mind at a time, especially people on the inside who can make such a difference, but all of us. And one community at a time. Dallas, yes, you could make a Now, effecting change is like driving a nail through a piece of wood. The experts may sharpen the nail, sharpen the point, but the expert can't push that nail through the piece of wood with their hands. You need the hammer of public opinion to drive that nail home. So this is, I talked about team effort at the beginning. This is a good team effort. I've come here and I've sharpened a few nails. I've given you a little bit more information, and there's much more of it available on our website and so on. But ultimately, the other half of the team is you, because you have to organize and do some of the things that Regina has talked about. And we can do it, and we're doing it in many other places as well. You've got plenty of resources. First of all, you've got the National Research Council report. 500 pages, very heavy going, but it is available for free online. This is for the real expert, the aficionado. The purpose of our book was to make that more accessible, more available to the ordinary person. And then for those who can't spend all that time, there's 50 reasons to oppose water fluoridation. You can get that on our webpage, fluoridalert.org. And then you've got a 29-minute DVD. I think this is our best weapon, this one right here. It's 15 scientists from around the world, very distinguished Nobel Prize winners and so on, who in a very down-to-earth language give 10 reasons why fluoridation should be stopped. And I think this is the ideal tool to give to your dentist. And I would do it like this. If you try to argue with your dentist or your doctor, you're not going to have, you'll see the eyes rolling, etc. But better to say, I'm not a dentist, I'm not a scientist, doc, I'm not, but I've watched this video and I'm very concerned with this. I'm very concerned with this. Now, you're a doctor, you're a dentist. Would you please look at this and tell me if I should be concerned or not? Okay? In other words, and come back in a week or two's time and ask him, have you seen that videotape? Should I be concerned or not? And I think you're respecting their professionalism, you're asking for their help, you might be lucky. Meanwhile, I think some of you should try to get your professors at different universities, do the same thing with them, recruit their effort. Because we know the real problem here is psychology, isn't it? 99.999% of us don't want another issue. We don't want this issue. None of these doctors, none of these professors at university will want to look into this issue. I know, because I didn't want to look into it. So you've got to come up with the psychological trick which will get them to open the first page, and then you might have a chance. Okay, so it's psychology up to that point. But you know that if you can make the psychological breakthrough, we have the information. My lovely son, Michael, who will be in Dallas tomorrow, 10 facts on fluoride. This is a 20-minute DVD which comes with a booklet, and we hope to have a nice leaflet, you know, one of these fold-up, six-sided, one-page leaflet. Communities that have stopped fluoridation, over 130 communities in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United States have stopped fluoridation. It's about 4 million people. You would jump it to over 5 million. In November, now I said some nasty things about Queensland, didn't I? But the new Premier of Queensland in November 2012 lifted the mandatory requirement. And it was like a stampede. About 50 communities in Queensland have stopped fluoridation. Didn't start it because of this thing. And then in April of 2013, the new Minister of Health in Israel announced that she was lifting mandatory fluoridation in June of 2014. It's right now. So we're going to see whether Israel does the same as the Australian communities. Given the chance, they bolt. We'll see. Now, I'll let you into a little secret. We're on a knife edge here. This Minister of Health did not have the support of the bureaucrats in the ministry. They want to continue fluoridation, and they're probably delighted to see the back of this minister. So we just got to hope that she hangs in there. She was a mayor of a city, and when she was mayor of that city, she opposed fluoridation. So, interesting. Politics, politics. Many citizens, media, and decision makers have little idea of the number and caliber of the people fighting fluoridation around the world. We don't actually, if you look at this room, you don't match up to those editorials in newspapers. I don't see a single tinfoil hat amongst you. Very intelligent people here. Okay, so they don't know this. So we need to make this exciting movement more visible. I'm one of the privileged ones. I get to see it. I've seen you, people like you, all over New Zealand about 6 times, Australia 6 or 7 times, Israel, Ireland many times, Canada dozens of times, United States, England. Hundreds of communities out there. Citizens like you, no axe to grind. You're not here to make money. You're not here to get power. You're here because of your kids, your grandkids, and your community. We need to bring all the groups and communities fighting fluoridation together and form one alliance, the Worldwide Alliance to End Fluoridation. So, Regina, where are you? Okay. May I invite you to get your group to join the Worldwide Alliance to End Fluoridation. Then on your letterhead, you can put as a footnote, a founding member of the Worldwide Alliance to End Fluoridation. I am sorry that that took me so long. Get carried away.
It was awesome.
Yeah, I'll take the question.
I want to give this to you first, sir. It's the Baylock Wellness Report. This is just the studies I've been doing on fluoride itself. Just if you have it, you have it. If not, it's not. I have a petition going around I want to give you afterwards and that whole box of other things. It does say fluoride's an additive in there, that we want to stop that. So, I mean, if you feel like signing it, sign it if you agree with what the doctor is saying all night tonight. So I have to go. My parents are rushing me, but God bless all you guys. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Good to meet you. Okay, perfect.
Do you ever try to test your own fluoride? Like, is there like a kitchen thing that we could do?
The testing is not easy. I mean, if you ask a chemist, they will say a selective, ion selective electrode. You get an electrode which selectively measures for fluoride, and it looks like a pH meter. You put the electrode into the solution, and it gives you an instantaneous reading. But it's not as simple as that. There are many ions which compete with these readings, and you've got to use a special buffer solution. And it's not an easy technique, and expensive to buy the electrode, and and it depends upon the matrix that you're putting it in. So you might not, it wouldn't be easy, for instance, to do it in milk or blood or something like that. So there are other ways of doing it, but some of the early studies on fluoride are just really complicated because the measurement, the analysis was so poor, inaccurate. So when I was still teaching, I did do a few measurements of water, wine, stuff like that.
I read an article some time back that said it's better to put chocolate in the water to help prevent cavities. Is there any truth in that?
Chocolate does contain some kind of theobromine or something, some kind of compound which is felt to fight tooth decay. And I bet every chocolate lover in the world just thought, great, great. The same kind of feeling when they said that red wine was good for you. I just well, I've been taking the medicine ever since. Yeah. Now, bloody Colgate puts out a chocolate-flavored toothpaste, but still has fluoride in it.
Cocoa beans has theobromine, and it fights cavities. And theobromine is called. And there is a new toothpaste that is called chocolate toothpaste you can actually buy that has 0 fluoride, and it's the new one in the market. That's what we highly recommend it, and I know my grandkids, they use it.
What's the name of it?
Chocolate toothpaste.
It's just
Chocolate toothpaste.
Who makes it?
Theoden company produces, yeah. Yeah, there you go.
There is a toothpaste and a mouthwash. It's called Vitamir. I buy it at the grocer, natural grocer. You have to order it in advance because it's always off the shelf. It's have all the best ingredients. It's all herbal, and it really works. If you wash your mouth when you finish, you touch your teeth, it squeak. It's so good. Thank you.
Okay, so you have several studies that indicate that it lowers intelligence 5 to 10 IQ points and increases probability of autism, ADD, ADHD, and so on. So what is the mechanism of action? What does it do to the brain? How does it change? What structures does it affect? How does it change the metabolism? What is the mechanism of action for brain damage? And since most of us here in this room have been affected by this in some way, because we've drunk city water, how do we reverse it in ourselves?
There are many, many mechanisms whereby fluoride could interfere with the brain. And it could interfere with calcium channels. You know, the influx of calcium triggers neurotransmission and so on. It's well known that fluoride inhibits one of the neurotransmitters, or the breakdown of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine esterase, which breaks down the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. It's known, studies by ZZ Guan in the Stockholm Institute and also in China. Guan is Chinese. His studies pertain to its interaction with the nicotinamide receptors in the brain. There are other studies which indicate whereabouts in the brain it's concentrated, where it goes to. It could be a G protein mechanism which is involved with signal transmission across membranes. So there's so many possibilities here. In fact, so many that I think any biochemist that starts to read about fluoride would say, don't get that anywhere near your body, and certainly don't get it near your baby's body. Their only pathetic response to this is, well, fluoride occurs naturally in the water. So does arsenic. And we're having to pay millions of dollars to get arsenic out of the water. And I would make that distinction, because it's something I've only thought about recently. This word natural, okay. Nature's verdict on fluoride is the baby doesn't need it and the baby shouldn't get it. That's nature's verdict. And that is a response of thousands, millions of years of experimentation and stuff. What about the natural fluoride in water? What's natural about that? This is nature. This is geology, right? This is rocks. How much fluoride is in your water is simply a reflection of what rocks the water has flown from the surface to the groundwater. And that's got nothing to do with nature. No decisions have been made by nature. This is rocks melting, and, you know, I'm not a geologist. But so there's two different uses of the word nature here. They like to say fluoride occurs naturally in water, therefore fluoride is okay. Nature thought of it first. I say baloney. There's nothing natural about that at all. It's just the vagaries of the rocks that you live near. On the other hand, as I said, what level of fluoride is in mother's milk is not an accident. It's not a vagary. It's after a lot of well thought out evolution.
A couple of things, Dr. Connett. First of all, on that World Health Organization chart I think you showed at the beginning of your presentation, it showed a decline in tooth decay among all the Western industrialized countries. That happens to coincide with an increase in dental visits among children in Western society.
I would say that the dominant factor is improved standard of living, that fluoride has a very strong relationship to poverty. Tooth decay has a very strong relationship to poverty. When people get more money, they get a better diet, they have little things like more refrigeration, they have more money to spend on visits to professional dentists and so on. So I think it's more a function of that. But that would be one of the factors.
I'd like to defend the ADA for just a moment. In one of their publications about fluoride recommendations for infants, they do make a solid recommendation that infants should not drink any bottled formula that contains water that's been fluoridated. The American Academy of Pediatric Dentists agrees with that recommendation, and they've published that information as well. They published that chart right after, both of them published that chart in documents that they publish online, immediately after saying water fluoridation is a reasonable way to reduce tooth decay in population. So they say on one hand, water fluoridation is okay, and then immediately after, but don't give it to the babies.
Yeah. When we tried to get a bill past the New Hampshire legislature, which used exactly the same language as the ADA had in the famous telegram of November the 9th, 2006, they opposed the bill. So on the one hand, they sort of cover themselves, I think, from a legal point of view, that they are giving out these warnings, but they're not taking serious steps. They're not taking serious steps to educate parents not to use fluoridated water to make up formula. There's hardly any warnings going out. The only warnings seem to be going within the profession itself, and maybe they will eventually trickle down to the citizen. But no help is being offered for low-income families to get other sources of water. But there is a huge contradiction here. And what happened, this is the way I read it historically. The ADA sent out this telegram to its membership. I think it was a liability thing. They can say they put the warning out there. But they didn't take any steps to inform the public in any aggressive manner, and then started to backtrack. You will find the statement that is there now is a woolly version of what they stated back in the 2006.
I'm confused about the whole thing about what brand of toothpaste to use. I use Tom's because I figure it's safe. I use a fluoride-free. And my mom kind of gets after me about that because, we've been taught growing up, fluoride toothpaste prevents cavities. So, and I was told that Crest toothpaste, and I was just reading about it, it actually has pieces of plastic in the toothpaste. The blue little sparkly little pieces, those are actually plastic, like plastic from trash cans, from trash bags. The same kind of plastic. So it's like all that we have to kind of worry about too. So
the key thing is brushing your teeth. Okay, brushing your teeth. Flossing your teeth. I love the advertisement says you don't have to floss your teeth, only the ones you want to keep, which I thought was very good. So brushing your teeth, using salt will work, using sodium bicarbonate, keeping the mouth alkaline probably helps a great deal. Cheese apparently is good at fighting tooth decay. But so Now, as far as the Tom's is concerned, Tom's has both a fluoridated and a non-fluoridated toothpaste. I think they were taken over by Colgate, and I believe there was a problem that Tom's could not get an ADA seal of approval because they didn't have fluoride in it, going back to earlier days. So again, I would suggest you look for toothpaste which has xylitol in it, and if you can throw in some chocolate and make yourself feel better at the same time, that sounds like good.
So we've been suggesting the Tom's toothpaste, which has been very hard to get the fluoride-free as a dentist. Shine discontinued carrying it, and then recently has started carrying it again for distribution to dentists. But now we're switching over to Spry xylitol toothpaste as a recommendation because it, as Dr. Kunduf has said, it helps to prevent decay. And Spry, like Tom's, has both a fluoride version and a non-fluoride version. So it's just a matter of being selective. But that is the main product that we're recommending right now. I think you'll find the children even think it tastes good, which is a big factor.
I think just the simple fact of brushing and flossing, even if you do it with water, works. And the Teodent, the company, thank you, is a company that came up with this new toothpaste, and it's truly it's chocolate flavor. And you get Teodent. It's like T-H-E-O-D-E-N-T. Yeah, you can Google it or go to their website. Yeah, wholesale also. Yeah, Whole Food.
Some of you are aware of Dr. Mercola. He, even before he understood about oil pulling, said that he had trouble with plaque in his mouth. Now, the chemistry in his mouth was such, whatever he was doing, however he was eating, was such that he had a horrible plaque problem. When he began cleaning his teeth by doing oil pulling, and you can find that on mercola.com, it started helping. It helped me as well. That has something to do with the pH in your mouth and the bacterial population in your mouth, whatever it's doing. This is the first time I ever heard cheese, but that makes sense. There's probiotics in cheese. Somehow the bacterial content of your mouth makes a difference on your dental health.
Thank you for coming all this way to teach us about the fluoride and everything about it. But one of the things I had a question about, I was reading on your website and some other websites about the skeletal fluorosis, and I'm concerned because probably like many people in here for decades we've drank the fluorinated water. And is there anything that we can do or take, or vitamins or supplements or something that we can do to get that excess fluoride out of our bones, out of our joints, or to undo the damage that was done?
What I can tell you as far as the bones are concerned is they turn over. And if you remove the sources of fluoride, eventually the fluoride will clear from the bones, or at least the stuff that's deposited on the outer layers of the bone, maybe not the inner layers. So remove the sources of fluoride. That's the first thing you do. Some people suggest that iodine may help to remove the fluoride. Other people suggested the borax can remove the fluoride. But the key thing is to get it out of the water. And that means political action. Oh, by the way, when you're thinking of the sources of fluoride, especially for children, be careful. Mechanically deboned meat is a big source. So when you mechanically deboned meat, so if you get patties, chicken patties, hamburgers, that kind of thing, the chicken, well, no, if you get the whole breast. So, but yeah, McNuggets, that kind of thing. Be careful because the fluoride goes to the bone. So if you've got little tiny bits of bone in a patty, that's the kids are going to get the fluoride. Similarly, they found high levels of fluoride in the chicken broth for babies. So that was coming from the bones. So be careful of animal bones. In that connection, I like tinned fish. tinned sardines, pilchard, salmon. The bones are very soft in those fish. Do not eat them. Separate the bones, only eat the flesh. What else can I say? Tea, of course. Tea is high in fluoride, both black tea and green tea.
How so?
What?
How so?
How so? Because the tea plant grows very effectively in high fluoride soils. And you've got high fluoride soils in India, China, and China in particular. So it's sad. What I would recommend there, I'm a big tea drinker. So what I recommend is you mix your drinks. You have tea, you have coffee, you have chamomile tea, get the herbal tea. Yeah, just mix them, water and stuff. Mix your drinks. Your danger is going to be fixated on one thing, like black tea or green tea, then you're going to get it in every cup.
Dr. Connett, the baby water, they've already noticed that it's bad for babies. Why is Gerber and all these infant water that they sell, they now say fluoridated, fluoride included?
I think they are putting out non-versions of things. I think they are worried about liabilities. There is a lawsuit against Nestle on fluoridated water. So it's coming, it's coming. I would recommend that you look into charcoal, not charcoal, bone char. Probably the cheapest filter. They use it in very large defluoridation equipment in India. And there's a woman, health store person in San Diego called Anita Shattuck, who works with Richard Sauhaber, who's a chemist, and he's been doing all analysis of all the filters. So you in particular should get in contact with him. I'll give you his email address. The bone char, B-O-N-E, bone char, C-H-A-R. And it works because the bone attracts fluoride.
Basically charcoal made from bone.
Yeah, that's right. Made from bone. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.